I'm bringing you somebody today that a friend of mine said, hey, you got to talk to this guy for so many different reasons. I mean, first and foremost, he's a fellow cop, but I think my favorite thing about him is he's a dog guy. And he really believes in the power of therapy dogs when we're talking about police officer mental health. He's also married to a cop, so I like that. Police Officer Joe King, welcome to the show.
Betsy, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on. And Steve, thank you for referring me. I appreciate that.
I'll tell you what, we have such a great team of writers at the National Police Association, and you can read all their articles and sign up for the newsletter at nationalpolice.org. And very often, our authors will reach out to me and say, hey, I talked to somebody, Betsy, that you need to talk to. And Joe, you're one of those guys. So, first and foremost, I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody who is or was a cop. Why'd you become a cop, Joe?
Well, I'm not going to give the cliched answer, but directly. But I grew up in Dallas, and my uncle was the Cedar Hill police officer, and I looked up to him. The uniform, their uniform is similar to Dallas, if you've ever seen it, and just the look. He out of all my family members, he pretty much carried himself in a way of structure and kindness, and I just wanted that had an impact on me as a kid. And growing up in Dallas, I had several interactions with Dallas police officers, especially through middle school into high school, and they were positive. And I love the Dallas police badge. I love the patch. It's so iconic. And I knew when I was going to get out of high school, I was going to apply for Dallas PD.
I just love that. Legacy policing is something that is kind of being diminished right now. So I'm glad to hear that story. And I hope that people listening will reach out to the young people in their lives and say, hey, you know what? Become a police officer, because it is really, as you and I both know, such a honorable profession, a wonderful profession. And you never have the same day twice. And you learn how to, I like what you said about your uncle. You learn how to carry yourself, and you also learn how to act with compassion. And that's something, obviously, you, Joe, you're a compassionate guy because you've been involved in police officer mental wellness for quite a while. Explain to folks who aren't that familiar even with our profession, explain why mental wellness is such a big concern in American law enforcement today.
Well, I think it's one of the most overlooked details of being a police officer and being a first responder, firefighters as well, and EMTs across the country. We are exposed to so much trauma daily. Doesn't even have to be one of the major critical incidents that get into a shootout. Those are rare, but they do happen. It's the day-to-day violence that we're exposed to, the grief of talking to complainants and victims and seeing violence firsthand. And we're on a high all day of being in a hypervigilant state. And then we go home. We have to come down from that high, and we have doctors, and there's the science out there that as high as you go throughout your day, you're going to crash, go down as low to just crash at the end of the day. And then you have to go home to your family, and you have to flip a switch and adjust to husband, parent, wife. You have to adjust to that. And we've seen historically in the first responder profession, there's a lot of relationship issues. There's a lot of bad coping mechanisms that we have out there with alcoholism. We've seen that in the Dallas Police Department. It's pretty rampant, but I think the root of it is because we are not addressing mental health and the trauma that we are exposed to, the cumulative trauma 10, 20, 30 years over and over.
Now, Dallas PD is one of the largest agencies in the nation. How large are you, and are you fully staffed right now?
No, we're on paper over slightly over 3,000 sworn, and I think we have 500 to 700 civilian staff. But at our highest strength, which I was actually on DPD for, we were close to 3,700. So we're way down, and recruiting across the country is very difficult, as you know. But yeah, we're doing more with less, just like everybody else.
How does that affect the mental health of police officers? Because when we go to work, we want to go to the calls, we want to be able to help people, we want to do as much as possible during our shift. How does being short staffed negatively impact your officers?
Well, you never catch a breath. I mean, out in patrol, I mean, there are calls holding for hours when you get on shift, and they're still holding when you leave. And then there's overtime, which that's just more exposure to trauma and all these calls. And detectives, they're so backlogged, and they're trying to catch up on because Dallas is a large city. In parts of it's a very violent city. A lot of calls for violence, a lot of death, a lot of homicides, a lot of aggravated assaults. And these detectives are, they're all, most of them are on call 24/7, and their families suffer from that. Their mental health, and just from a sheer fatigue aspect, they're exhausted.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think a lot of people, think about that uniformed cop out there patrolling a beat, going to 911 calls. But I think most people's view of a detective is, Law and Order, SVU, or whatever. Obviously, they're busy, but I don't think that most people understand the sheer exhaustion and the mental trauma involved in being that detective who comes in, every morning or every evening, sits down at that desk and opens up those, electronic files where there's 60 or 70 plus felony cases waiting for you to investigate. That's just about as bad as running call to call, isn't it, Joe?
Oh, absolutely. Because you look at it's secondary trauma, and a lot of the detectives, some of the detectives respond out to the scene. They see the trauma firsthand, but it's different than seeing than a uniform officer seeing it firsthand. But it's secondary trauma either way you look at it. Detectives have cases piled up for weeks. They have to go out and comb through, and now there's so much digital evidence, ring videos, surveillance videos, cell phone tower warrants they have to put in for. There's so much paperwork they have to do for one case, and they have to go and talk to the complainants, talk to the witnesses, interview the suspects. They have to prep a case for from the prosecutorial side. That's a lot of stress and pressure too. But one thing I know, the homicide detectives, one of their hardest tasks, it's not necessarily just going out and seeing the bodies, it's giving the death notifications. They have to go out and they have to grieve with the wailing family members, and because the parents, especially when there's kids involved, that's a lot that they have to deal with. And I think you're right. The glamorous job of a detective, it's very rewarding because you get some semblance of justice for some of the victims, but it is at a cost.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It takes a real emotional toll.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about dogs. I got 3 dogs right outside the door here in my studio that are waiting for me.
They're
Um,
missing you.
I I love the trend that we are seeing around the country of, not we're not talking about canine units, we're talking about therapy dogs for first responders. Talk about the program you guys have in Dallas.
Yeah, so we had a Greyhound. He just since recently had to be retired for health reasons, but we were going to get another one. He's the first Greyhound used as a therapy dog for first responders in the United States. His name is Aussie, and we got him in early October of 2023, and he hit the ground running. And no pun intended, people gravitated to him. We would take him out to details. We have 7 substations in Dallas PD, along with headquarters, and we go out and we would pay these details of visits at all shifts. And the smiles that he brought with him. And the Greyhound breed is very unique. They look different. I've had so many people tell me I've never seen a Greyhound in person. Oh, they're on the side of a bus, but they look unique. They're very docile. They're gentle, and they're real empathic. And the energy they give off with their calmness is the others absorb it when they're in his presence. So it was really nice to see. I would show up to critical incidents, to shooting calls, and he would interact with the children. He would interact with some of the victims. The detectives loved him, and I would make a trip through homicide and sex assault and robbery units quite frequently within headquarters with him. And even if it was a slight distraction from their busy or hectic day or stressful day, it was worth it. And I would actually have units request him to come out quite often.
I'll tell you, you and I have that in common. I also had a rescued Greyhound, and if people are unfamiliar with the breed, because this is not a breed you're going to go to the shelter or the dog pound or whatever and find. You kind of have to seek them out. A lot of them are retired racers, and they are one of the most extraordinary breeds of dogs for people to adopt. They are just, everybody thinks they're these crazy hyper racing dogs. They're basically they sleep 23 hours a day unless they're doing something. They're kind and they're gentle and they're sweet, and like you said, empathic. Talk more about that.
What's just the energy? So there's a story that I could give you and the listeners. There was a Dallas Fire and Rescue. Our unit works closely with Dallas Fire and Rescue, which is also one of the larger fire departments in the state. They had a firefighter that had death by suicide. So that morning before they went to the funeral, they actually requested to stop by the PD to meet with Aussie. So I was like, okay, great. Well, we went out and met with like 12 firefighters. Well, there was one chaplain that was there, the firefighter chaplain. She was really struggling with having to go to the scene and work with the family. And she knew the firefighter personally. She was really having a hard time. Well, these dogs are so intuitive. And he also has had training to pick up on signs of depression and anxiety. And we had to go through that panel of training. He went directly to that chaplain during this meeting without even being prompted. He just went straight to her.
Joe, what do you suggest for anybody who might be watching, either a citizen who wants to get this kind of program going for their own agency, or a police officer? What are some of the steps that you suggest?
Well, there are several organizations out there, not just the Greyhounds, but there's several organizations out there that have programs for military and for first responders for therapy dogs. Aussie Mates in the States, I can vouch for them that they basically free of charge will come to your department, train up whatever staff member you want, and they will give you a dog, and the costs are covered, the training's covered, which is a big thing. You just need to have a dedicated person to be the handler that you want to get that dog to be exposed to as many of your staff as you can. Because Dallas PD, as large as we are, we've seen the positive side of that. If you need to contact me with Dallas PD, joe.king@dallaspolice.gov, I will get you in contact with the Greyhound folks from Australia or some local agencies here in Texas. But there's so many different therapy dog programs out there, but the benefits are just they're just through the roof. And I can speak from experience with a department our size.
Yeah, the National Police Association sponsors a therapy dog named Lunabelle. You can go to our website, nationalpolice.org, and you can follow her on social media and her handler. And it's the same story with every therapy dog handler I've ever talked to, that how necessary this is. And like Aussie, Lunabelle was a rescue. And I think that that's one of the things. You don't need a $10,000 purebred dog, with all this training. You can get the training later. You just need a dog that has some of those instinctual characteristics to really be able to see in people that need for some comfort. Now, you took your dog home, right?
Yeah, he is part of the family. He come home with me, and when it was work time, he would put on his little blue vest that had his patches on it, and that was his uniform. But when it was time to go home, he was a couch potato.
Exactly. Now you share some of your experiences in a podcast. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm also a board member of the Sissy Officer Foundation here in Dallas. It was started in 1999. It was to give financial assistance to police in the Metroplex if they have an injury, illness, or a death or another catastrophic incident that happened to them. It has since grown. We help officers and firefighters in the Metroplex, not just Dallas PD. And we also, since 2010, have started up a confidential counseling program that we pay for counseling for police, fire, and their families, their children. We provide that as well. So I saw a need for more education on this and more mental health awareness. I was at a conference and I saw a panel of 10 first responders up speaking, and they were given 10 minutes each to speak. And it was a room full of cops and fire from across Texas. And listening to these heroes tell their stories, very candid, very raw, their resiliency, their failures, because I think there's value in hearing failures because you can learn from it and grow. I was looking around the room, I was seeing hands shaking, I was seeing teary eyes, and then afterwards it started a conversation that I've never seen before in policing about addressing mental health and people being open and honest about it as opposed to just burying it. So I went and told our chairman, Ed Lujan, on the next break, actually, and I said, hey, there's value in this. There's value in these stories. I want to start a podcast for it. Well, I didn't know what I was doing. So I got with some smart people that I work with. Everything on the podcast is police. Police have their hands on it, from the editing to the recording to the hosting. And I'm proud of that. It's called ATO Bridging the Divide. And it can be found on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, iHeart, all of them. And we have on police, fire, we have on police supporters, we have on mental health doctors that are culturally competent in the first responder world, that meaning they have dealt with us, they understand the trauma. And a lot of it's for education, but also a lot of the episodes are for capturing police and fire and military history, and especially Dallas PD. Dallas PD has a lot of history here.
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. And I'm so glad you're doing that because really a lot of our history does get lost, but you're doing an outstanding job of not just addressing the mental health, but really addressing some of the heroics and some of the I've listened to some of the episodes. There's some humor in it. There's a lot of different things to pique people's interests, and people love police podcasts, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I mean, I tell everybody you're either going to be motivated, inspired, or educated, or you just may hear a cool ass cop story.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's so great to be able to hear those stories. We just have a couple of minutes left, but another thing that you and I have in common is we come from two cop households. And so just for a minute, I want to talk about that, especially because you're a guy. It's a challenge sometimes, right, to be married to a female cop. A lot of joys, a lot of challenges. Talk about that for a minute.
Well, it's a lot of joys, a lot of challenges, and it's different because understanding the profession, she understands it, and also can call me out on bullshit, and she can do the same. She's a child abuse detective. Her name is Kristen King, and she does a job that I could not do. it's a noble job. You're dealing with true victims of crimes and these kids. And I kind of become her sounding board and her wellness tool to come home, and basically I get to hear about all these horrific these crimes, but that's her therapy, is to dump on me and me listen and just shut up and just hear it out. And they're hard to listen to, I'm not going to lie, but it's important for us to support each other and that, because I don't think there's anybody out there that wouldn't drop everything and help a kid if they had the chance.
Oh yeah, it's an extraordinary job that your wife does, and I really do believe that when we talk about police officer mental health, there can be a lot of benefits to being married to somebody in the profession, to be able to talk about it and really kind of debrief. But I bet and I know you've also got to make time to just be a couple and a family, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we talk about work, then we'll go watch some silly movie to decompress. But what's good about that, being married, and you know this, is that you understand what the person is talking about and what they're going through. You understand the trauma, you understand the stress, so it's not foreign to us to hear it. And we've got our own way of compartmentalizing and packing it away and processing it too. And so I think there's a huge benefit in that, and just understanding it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Joe, tell folks again where they can find the podcast, where they can find you.
Okay. You can find me at Dallas PD. I work every day, every week. I'm off weekends, but I'm always on call. You can find the podcast, ATO Bridging the Divide. It's on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the streaming platforms. It's free to listen to. And we're coming up on episode 100, which has been a mystery episode. It's going to be explosive. It's going to be emotional, and I'm excited for everybody to hear it. And then it's going to return after a little break after 100.
Joe, we cannot thank you enough for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Are you passionate about supporting law enforcement? The National Police Association is on a mission to strengthen our communities, protect our families, and ensure justice prevails. But they need your help. Every dollar you donate makes a difference. It funds the legal defense of police officers and police agencies, supports advocacy for pro-law enforcement legislation, and funds community outreach programs and education. Imagine safer streets, stronger bonds between officers and neighborhoods, and a brighter future for all. Join us. Visit our website at nationalpolice.org to donate today.